My 4.5-year-old son pointed to the rich second generation in the newspaper and called his father. I was so frightened that I immediately covered his mouth. But the next day, this man actually kicked open the door of my house directly with a paternity test. And at this time he was holding 2 paternity tests in his hand. Look at me seriously. My eyes are scarily red. Xiao, why didn't you tell me that you gave birth to twins that year? I froze in place. Xiao was still standing behind me, holding his favorite little dinosaur toy in his hand. He turned pale with fright, but he still stretched out his little hand and grabbed the corner of my clothes tightly. My first reaction is not an explanation. I rushed into the kitchen, picked up a fruit knife, and stood in front of the boat. We broke up a long time ago. Get out of here. My voice was shaking, but the tip of the knife was not shaking. Shen Yan saw the knife and stopped. He is colder than he was 5 years ago, and he is more like the man in the newspaper who cannot be approached. But his eyes are not as emotionless as in the newspaper. He looked at me and then at the boat behind me. That glance was like being cut by a knife. Xiao, he said. My heart sank. He knows the name of the child. Xiao hid behind my legs and asked in a low voice, Mom, who is he? I didn't answer. I stared at Shen Yan. How did you find here? Hospital records, he said. Who gave it to you? I checked it myself. I sneered. The prince of the Fu family wants to check on someone. Of course it is easy. You found it now. And then you want to take my child away. Shen Yan's eyebrows tightened. I'm not here to rob the child. Then you brought so many people to kick the door. Are you here to deliver breakfast? My tone was cold. I know I can't beat him, and I can't stop the Fu family, but I can't be soft. If I soften once, I will lose the boat. 5 years ago, I had already lost a child. I can't afford to lose the second one. Shen Yan looked at the knife in my hand and lowered his voice. Xiao, put down the knife. You will hurt yourself. You take a step forward, and I'll let you see who I will hurt. The room was quiet. Xiao cried. He didn't cry loudly. He just bit his lip with his teeth, and his little shoulders shook. My heart was numb. I pushed him behind me. Xiao, enter the room and lock the door. He refused. Mom, I don't want to go. Obedient, with tears in his eyes, he slowly retreated to the room. Shen Yan looked at him. That look made me even more confused. I have seen Shen Yan indifferent. I have seen him angry. And I have seen him take me into his arms on a rainy night and say that he will not let me be wronged. But I have never seen him look at a child like this. It seems that he has finally found his lost life. The boat closed the door. I heard the door lock rattle gently. I just looked at Shen Yan. Now, say, what the hell do you want to do? Shen Yan put the documents in his hand on the table. The first one is the paternity test between me and Xiao. I didn't look at it. I don't need to look at it. I know whose child he is. Shen Yan's Adam's apple moved. The second one is the paternity test between me and another child. My fingers tight. What another child? A girl, he said, 4.5 years old. My name is Shen Xingmian. There was a bang in my head. The fruit knife slipped out of my hand and fell to the ground. The voice was very soft, but it seemed to hit my bones. I looked at him. What did you say? Shen Yan picked up the second appraisal. His voice was a little hoarse. She is also my child. The age is the same as Xiao. The date of birth is the same. Blood relationship shows that she and Xiao are twins. I took a step back. The back hits the wall. The cold wall was against my back, but I felt hot all over. Impossible. I heard myself say. Impossible. Shen Yan took a step towards me. I didn't take the knife again, because my hands have no strength anymore. Xiao, she's still alive. These 5 words, like a hand, reached into my chest and tore open the wound I had buried 5 years ago. I remember that day. The hospital lights are very white. Blood flowed out from under me. Doctors and nurses ran around me. I was in so much pain that I couldn't even make a sound. Someone brought a crumpled baby boy in front of me. The nurse said, the boy is alive. I asked, where's the girl? No one answered. Later, a doctor took off his mask and said to me, the baby girl was not saved. I don't believe it. I got out of bed and knelt on the ground and begged him. I said, let me take a look. I just want to take a look. But they didn't show me. They say the child has been processed. They also said that I was in poor health, and if I continued to make trouble, I wouldn't even be able to save the boy. I hugged the boat and fled through the back door of the hospital. I thought I had taken my only surviving child, but now Shen Yan is standing in my house and telling me that my daughter is still alive. I rushed over and grabbed him by the collar. Where is she? Shen Yan did not hide. Fu family. My eyes went dark. Say it again. She is in the Fu family. She was raised in the Fu family. I slapped him in the face. The sound is very loud. The bodyguards outside the door all moved. Shen Yan raised his hand and stopped them. His face was tilted to one side, and the corners of his mouth quickly turned red. I have no regrets. I just hate that I played too lightly. She's in the Fu family. I stared at him. My daughter has been in the Fu family for 4.5 years. Shenan, are you just coming to tell me now? He looked at me with pain in his eyes. I only found out a month ago. A month. I laughed, but tears fell. You've known for a month, and you only came to me today. I can't take you back when there's no evidence. He said, I need to confirm the identity of Xiao. And I also need to confirm the identity of Xingmian. I need to know what you went through back then. You want to know now. I pushed him away. Where did you go 5 years ago? Where did you go when I was pregnant with a child? The Fu family came to me with the agreement you signed, saying that you don't want me or children. Do you know how they treat me? They say I'm lowly, I'm greedy for money, and I'm not worthy of having your child. Shen Yan's face changed. What agreement? Stop pretending. I turned around and dug out a tin box from the old cabinet. The tin box contains things I have not dared to look at all these years. The yellowed agreement is still in it. The edges of the paper are old, but the words on it are clear. I threw it in front of Shen Yan. See for yourself. Shen Yan bent down to pick it up. His eyes fell on the signature. I saw his fingers slowly tightening. I didn't sign it. Of course you didn't sign it. I said. People like you always have countless reasons. No. Shen Yan raised his head. Xiao, this is really not what I signed. I looked into his eyes. 5 years ago, I also believed in him. I believe he won't want me. I believe he will come to me. I believed it for a month, 2 months, 3 months, until my belly grew bigger day by day, until I was kicked out by my landlord, until I bleeded in the hospital, until I heard that my daughter was dead. From that day on, I stopped believing. Shen Yan. I don't want to hear it. I snatched the agreement back. You go. He stood still. I'm going to take you to see her. I stopped breathing. I knew this was the most dangerous word, but I was still held by it. Daughter. My daughter. I never hugged her. I don't know what she looks like. Will she laugh? Will she be afraid of the dark? When she was sick, did anyone hug her? The first time she called her mother, who did she call? I covered my mouth so I didn't cry. Shen Xian said. Her name is Xingxing. She is not in good health. She is quiet. Shut up. I interrupted him. I don't want to hear him say about my daughter in a familiar tone. He has been with her for 4.5 years. I didn't. It hurts more than a knife. The door to the room suddenly opened. Xiao Zhou stood there, his eyes red. Mom. I wiped away my tears immediately. Xiao Zhou, go in. He shook his head. Mom. Is he my father? All the sounds in the room stopped. I looked at the boat. This child is too smart. He didn't ask who his father was since he was a child. Not because he wasn't curious, but because he knew I would be sad. But today, Shen Yan is standing here. He looked at the face that was similar to his own, and it was impossible to pretend not to know. I crouched down and hugged him. Xiao Zhou, I don't know how to put it. I don't want to lie to him. I don't want him to be scared. Shen Yan suddenly squatted down on one knee and looked at Xiao Zhou. Xiao Zhou. I am Shen Yan. Xiao Zhou stared at him. Are you my father? Shen Yan's eyes were even redder. Yes. The boat was silent for a few seconds. Then he asked. Then why didn't you come to me and my mother before? This sentence is heavier than my slap. Shen Yan's lips moved, but he did not answer immediately. Xiao Zhou asked again. Is it because you don't like us? No. Shen Yan's voice was very low. I don't know where you guys are. I didn't know you were born either. Xiao Zhou looked at me. Mom. Is what he said true? I hugged him tightly. I don't know. This is the truth. I really don't know. I don't know which of Shen Yan's words is true and which is false. I only know that in this belated truth, my child and I have been hurt too deeply. Shen Yan stood up. The stars are now in the Fu family's old house. Ji Ruowei was also there. When I heard the name, my body stiffened. Ji Ruowei, one of the women sent by the Fu family to humiliate me 5 years ago. She was wearing a white dress, standing at the door of the ward, and said to me, Xiao, you are just a bird that Shen Yan raised when he was bored. Now that the cage is open, it's time for you to fly away. I was pregnant with a child and couldn't even stand still. She left a check next to my bed. 5 million. By you and the child to disappear. I tore up the check. She smiled and said, you will regret it. Later, I really regretted it. I regret not smashing that check in her face. Why is the star with her? I asked. Shen Yan said. She told the Fu family that the stars are her and my children. My brain went numb again. Do you believe it? I don't believe it. But you asked my daughter to call her mother. Shen Yan did not refute. He seemed to be nailed to the place by these words. It took a long time for him to say, the star hasn't called her mother. I was stunned. What? She calls her Aunt G. This sentence did not make me comfortable. It hurts me even more. A 4.5-year-old child lives in a wealthy family, with no biological mother or real father by his side. She faces the people who steal her every day. How scared should she be? I closed my eyes. When I opened it again, I had already made a decision. They'll go to the Fu family with you. Shen Yan looked at me. I said, not because I believe you. It's because I want to see my daughter. He nodded. Okay, Anne. I looked at him. You hear clearly. I won't give you the boat, nor will I leave the stars to the Fu family. Whoever steals my child will have to pay. Shen Yan's voice was hoarse. They'll find out. No. You will check. I said, yes, I will check. I went back to my room to change my clothes. Xiao Zhou sat on the edge of the bed and grabbed my hand. Mom, are we going to see my sister? I nodded. Yes. Will she like me? My nose was sore. Yes. Then will she like her mother? I paused. I don't know. She probably hates me. She probably thought I had really abandoned her. She may have been taught. Don't believe me, but I still said, Mom will let her know that Mom has always loved her. Xiaozhou nodded seriously. Then I love her too. I hugged him. I think of the 4.5 years I lost. In those nights, I often dreamed of a little girl whose face I couldn't see clearly. She stood far away, crying and calling my mother. Every time I ran over, she disappeared. I woke up with my pillow all wet. Now she is not dead. She is in the capital. In the Fu family. I was so scared that my whole body trembled. I also hate that my heart is stiff. The car arranged by Shen Yan was parked downstairs. Neighbors stand in the hallway and watch. They saw the black convoy, saw the bodyguards, saw Shen Yan, and saw me leading the boat out. Over the years, I have rented the smallest house here, done the most ordinary work, and lived the quietest days with my children. I always thought that as long as I didn't make a sound, no one would find me, but fate still kicked open my door. It was quiet in the car. Xiaozhou sat in the child's seat and secretly looked at Shen Yan. Shen Yan also looked at him. The profiles of the two people looked terrifying. I turned my head and looked out the window. From the old city to the center of the capital, the road is getting wider and wider, and the buildings are getting taller and taller. The old house of the Fu family is at the foot of the mountain in the north of the city. I have only been there once. 5 years ago, I was taken there by the Fu family. Old Mrs. Fu sat on the high sofa and looked at me like a prisoner. She said, Shen Yan's future path is not something a woman like you can accompany you. When the child is born, the Fu family will arrange. You take the money and go. I said, the child is mine. She laughed. In the capital, what the Fu family wants will belong to the Fu family. I was too young then. I think people always have a bottom line. Later I learned that some people's bottom line is just a decoration for others to see. The car was parked in front of the Fu family's old house. The iron door slowly opened. The guard N is large and the grass is neatly mowed. Everything is decent, but I just feel cold. Shinna got out of the car first. He went around and opened the door for me. I didn't ask him to help me. I pulled the boat out of the car. Then I saw a little girl standing on the steps. She was wearing a white its skirt. Her hair was softly draped over her shoulders, and her face was very white. Her eyes are big. She looked at me and at the boat. At that moment, I forgot to breathe. She looks almost exactly like Xiaozhou. It's just that Xiao's eyes are brighter, and her eyes are quieter and more careful. My hand started shaking. Xiaozhou was also stunned. He whispered, Mom, she's really just like me. The girl slowly walked down the steps. She stopped 3 steps away from me and looked up at me. Her voice was soft. Are you my mother? Tears welled up in my eyes. I squatted down and wanted to hug her, but before she could be touched, another woman came out of the door. Ji Ruowei wore a white dress, exactly the same as 5 years ago. She walked up to the girl and pulled her into her arms. Then she looked at me and smiled coldly. Star, she's not your mother. The girl's body trembled. Ji Ruowei lowered her head and said word by word in her ear, she was just the woman who sold you back then. I didn't rush up to hit Ji Ruowei. Not because I didn't want to. It's because the stars are in her arms. I'm afraid of scaring the child. I saw the star's fingers clutching the hem of the skirt. She didn't cry. She didn't hide. She just lowered her head, like a person who did something wrong. My heart was pierced by her movement. She was only 4.5 years old. Why is she so afraid? The boat suddenly let go of my hand and walked in front of me. He looked up at Ji Ruowei. You liar. Ji Ruowei looked down at him, and the smile on her face faded. Are you that boy? Xiaozhou didn't answer her. My mother wouldn't sell her children, he said. Ji Ruowei sneered. You are so young. What do you know? I understand. Zaya's voice was not loud, but it was very steady. Mom loves me very much. She doesn't eat at night and buys me milk. When it rained, she ran home with me in her arms, and her shoes were broken. She won't want her sister. My throat tightened. I wanted to pull the boat back, but he stood there like a very small warrior. Xingxing secretly looked up at him. There is strangeness in that eye, and there is also a little light. Shen Yan walked up to Ji Ruowei. Let her go. Ji Ruowei's face changed. Shenan, you even have to scare the stars for this woman. I said, let her go. His voice was cold. Ji Ruowei's fingers holding Xingxing's shoulders slowly loosened. The stars didn't run to me right away. She just stood still. I crouched down, trying to make my voice softer. Star, my name is Xiao Xiao. She looked at me. I want to say I'm a mom, but Ji Ruowei's words just now were still pressing in her heart. I can't force her to accept me, so I said, you can call me Aunt Xiao Xiao first. Xingxing's eyes moved slightly. Ji Ruowei immediately said, of course she can only call you Auntie. Xiao Xiao, don't forget, you signed a waiver of support agreement back then. She clapped her hands. Soon, a servant brought a bag of documents. Ji Ruowei pulled out a piece of paper from it. Shen Yan, you should take a look too. This woman was not forced to leave back then. She took the money and left. She handed the agreement to Shen Yan. In black and white, she voluntarily gave up custody of her daughter. She took the money and pretended to be pitiful. Now that you are in power, you have come back with your son to divide the property. Do you really want to believe her? Shen Yan did not answer. Ji Ruowei's face couldn't hang up. She turned to the Fu family hall. Old lady, Say something. The sound of crutches falling to the ground came from the hole. An old man with silver hair came out. Mrs. Fu. I haven't seen her for 5 years. And she is still like that. The clothes are neat. The hair is not messy. And the eyes are as cold as old silver. She looked at me without any surprise. Like I'm not alone. It's just an old thing that will be sent back sooner or later. Xiao Xiao, she said. You're still here. I stood up. My daughter is here. Of course I will come. She smiled softly. Your daughter. I looked at her. She was born out of my body. She is of course my daughter. Old Mrs. Fu glanced at the stars. The stars immediately bowed their heads. This action made my heart even colder. Old Mrs. Fu said. A mother will not leave her child in the hospital. It won't be 5 years without hearing or asking. I took a step forward. I didn't lose her. Ji Ruowei held up the agreement. So what is this? The name you signed with your own hands. The fingerprints you pressed with your own hands. I looked at the paper. The signature is indeed like me. The fingerprints are also like the real thing. I felt a stifling in my chest. I was in a coma several times in the hospital 5 years ago. Some people have drawn my blood. And some have asked me to press more than one document. They said it was a consent form for surgery. They said that if they didn't sign, the boat would be in danger. At that time, I had just given birth and was so weak that I couldn't even open my eyes. It turned out that from that moment on, they were preparing to take my daughter away from me. I looked at Ji Ruowei. This agreement is fake. Ji Ruowei smiled. What you say is fake. What about the evidence? I didn't speak right away. I turned my head to look at Xin Yan. I want to look at the original medical records of the hospital. There are also all the documents about the stars in the Fu family's data room. Old Mrs. Fu said coldly. You are not qualified. Then I'll call the police. The faces of the people in the hall changed. I took out my phone. Children were stolen. Birth records were falsified. And parent-child relationships were concealed. Do you want to solve it here? Or do you want the police to solve it? Old Mrs. Fu's eyes sank. Ji Ruowei immediately said, You threaten the Fu family. Not a threat. I looked at her. It's a notice. Xin Yan finally spoke. Open the data room. Old Mrs. Fu looked at him suddenly. Xin Yan. I said. Open the data room. Old Mrs. Fu clenched her crutches. You want to turn over the old things of the Fu family for her. Xin Yan looked at her. If there is a crime hidden in the old things of the Fu family, it should be turned out. This sentence makes the hall quieter. I glanced at Xin Yan. I am not moved. I just wrote it down in my heart. Just because he's willing to stand up now doesn't mean that past injuries don't exist. But I will not refuse useful help either. The Fu family data room is on the SEC. On floor. When the door opened, there was a smell of paper and wood mixed together. There are many cabinets and documents inside, but the person in charge of keeping the information searched for a long time and only took out a thin folder. Xin Yan opened the folder. His face getting colder and colder. There was only a copy of the birth record inside. There are watermarks on the paper, and the handwriting is blurry, but I still read a few lines clearly. Mother, Xiao Xiao, delivery, twins, baby boy, survive, baby girl. Transferred to the neonatal observation room. I stared at that line, my eyes hurting badly. The baby girl was transferred to the neonatal observation room. Not death. It's not that I didn't keep it. She lived. At least after birth. She lived. I reached out and touched the paper. My fingertips shaking. They lied to me. My voice was soft. They told me she was dead. The stars stood at the door, looking at me carefully. She seemed to understand, but she didn't seem to believe it. I turned to her. This time, Ji Ruowei stood in front of me. Don't get close to her. I looked at her. What are you afraid of? Ji Ruowei sneered. I'm afraid she will be deceived by you. What qualifications does a woman who can even lose her own child pretend to be a mother? I didn't endure it anymore. I raised my hand and slapped her hard. The crisp sound exploded in the data room. Ji Ruowei covered her face and looked at me in disbelief. Do you dare to hit me? I should have hit you a long time ago. I looked at her and said word by word. 5 years ago. You came to the hospital and said that I was not worthy of staying with Xin Yan. Later, my daughter was taken away. Now you are holding a fake agreement and saying that I will sell my daughter. Ji Ruowei. You better pray that this matter has nothing to do with you. Ji Ruowei's eyes flashed. At that moment, I saw panic. It's short, but enough. Xin Yan also saw it. He asked, 5 years ago, on the day Xiao Xiao gave birth, where were you? Ji Ruowei immediately said, I am abroad. Which country? France. Specific city. Paris. Where to live? Ji Ruowei's face was a little stiff. It's been too long. How do I remember? Xin Yan looked at the assistant. Check her entry, exit and hotel records that year. The assistant nodded immediately. Ji Ruowei was anxious. Xin Yan, what do you mean? You doubt me. I doubt everyone involved in this matter. His voice had no temperature. Xiao Zhou suddenly took my hand. Mom. I bowed my head. He pointed to Ji Ruowei's wrist. That aunt has a scar on her hand. Ji Ruowei subconsciously retracted her hand into her sleeve. I looked in the direction the boat was pointing. Gee, there is a very shallow old scar on the inside of her right wrist. It's hard to spot if you don't look closely. Xiao Zhou said. Mom, there used to be a video on your phone. There was a woman holding a baby in it. And she also had such a scar on her hand. My brain shook. That video, I almost forgot. 5 years ago, before I escaped from the hospital, I used my old phone to take a video of the hallway. I had just heard that my daughter had died. I don't believe it. I took advantage of the nurse's inattention and walked to the neonatal observation room against the wall. At the end of the corridor, a woman came out with a swaddling arm. I was too weak to even hold my phone steadily. The video only features the woman's back and half of her wrist. Later, I saw her face many times, but I couldn't see her face clearly. But the boat has seen it. He was still young at the time and always liked to look at photos on my old phone. I immediately said, "The video is in my old phone." Shin Yen looked at me. "Where's the phone?" "My family. I'll let someone pick it up." "No," I said. "I'll take it myself. I don't want to give the last bit of evidence to anyone in the Fu family." Shin Yen understood what I meant. He said, "I will send a lawyer to accompany you." I didn't refuse. Ji Ruowei sneered. "What does a blurry video say? Xiao Xiao, you have a child. And you want to come to the Fu family to rob another child. Do you think that if you play a bitter drama, everyone will believe you?" I looked at her. "I don't need everyone to believe it. I just need the evidence to speak." Old Mrs. Fu suddenly spoke. "Enough." She looked at Shin Yen. "The stars are not in good health and cannot be stimulated. This woman and this boy must leave today." "I'm not leaving," I said. Old Mrs. Fu looked at me coldly. "This is not a place for you to run wild. This is where my daughter has been hiding for 4.5 years. I said, "I'm here today, not to ask the Fu family to give me a place, whether the Fu family gives it or not. I am not uncommon. I came to take away my child." The star heard the word take away and trembled slightly. I saw it. I felt distressed, but I didn't change my mind. I know she's still afraid of me, but I also know that she can't stay with these people. Old Mrs. Fu said, "Do you dare?" I took out my phone, pressed the alarm number, and didn't dial out. "You can try." Old Mrs. Fu's face was gloomy. Shin Yen stood beside me. "She won't go. The boat won't go either. Starting today, they will live here until things are clarified." I turned to look at him. "I won't live in the Fu family." Shin Yen glanced at me. "That lives in the villa under my name. Safety, doctors, and lawyers. I just want to see the stars." "She can go with you." As soon as this sentence came out, Ji Ruowei immediately screamed. "No, the stars can't go with her." I looked at her coldly. "What are you nervous about?" Ji Ruowei looked at the stars with a warning in her eyes. Xingxing immediately lowered his head and did not dare to speak. My heart sank. Shin Yen also noticed. He crouched down and looked at the stars. "Xingxing, would you like to live with Aunt Xiao Xiao and Brother Xiaozhou for a few days?" The stars did not answer. She looked at me and then at Ji Ruowei. Ji Ruowei smiled and said, "Xingxing, how does Auntie usually teach you? You can't go with strangers." The star's small face is whiter. I didn't force her. I walked up to her and squatted down. "Stars, you don't have to decide now. You don't have to be afraid of me. If you don't want to go with me, I won't take you today." Shin Yen looked at me. I know he was surprised. I want to take her away too. I want to get her out of here immediately. But I was even more afraid that she would be afraid. She has already been robbed once. I can't rob her again in the same way. The stars looked up at me. Her lips moved. After a long time, she asked in a low voice, "If I don't go with you, will you not want me?" My tears almost fell. I shook my head. "No." She asked again, "If I go with you, will Aunt Ji be angry?" Ji Ruowei immediately said, "Star." The stars trembled in fright. I stood up and blocked Ji Ruowei's view. "Don't scare her." Ji Ruowei's face was ugly. "I raised her for 4.5 years. What do I care about her? You raised her." I laughed. "You used my child to deceive the Fu family, deceived Shin Yen. And now you still have the face to say that you raised her. What has she eaten and used all these years? Which one is not from the Fu family?" Ji Ruowei was also anxious. "What did you give her?" "I gave her life." I looked at her. "And what did you give her?" "Lies, fears, and his stolen identity." Ji Ruowei still wanted to talk. The star suddenly reached out and grabbed my cuff. Very light, like a leaf falling. I looked down at her. She looked at me too. "I want to talk to Brother Xiaozhou," she said. My heart was sore and soft. "Okay." Old Mrs. Fu wanted to stop it, but Shin Yan gave the bodyguard a look and asked the bodyguard to stand at the door. No one dared to move anymore. The boat led the stars to the small hall next to it. I stood outside the door and watched the two of them sit on the carpet. The boat puts the baby dinosaur in front of the stars. "This is for you," the star whispered. "I don't have a toy." Xiaozhou was stunned. "Don't you have it?" Xingxing nodded and shook his head quickly. "Yes, but don't mess it up. Don't fall. You can't laugh out loud." Xiaozhou thought for a while and said, "Then you will play with me in the future. I have a lot. And my mother will fix it." The stars looked at me. The look in his eyes was strange and longing. I turned my face away, afraid that she would see me crying. In the evening, Shin Yan arranged for us to live in the side building of the Fu family. I originally refused, but the star doctor hadn't come yet, and she didn't dare to leave the old house too far. "I can only stay for a while." Xiaozhou fell asleep quickly after taking a shower. He had experienced too much today and was frowning in his sleep. I covered him with a quilt and walked to the next room. Xingxing sat on the edge of the bed. holding the little dinosaur given to her by the boat in her arms. When she saw me come in, she immediately sat up straight. I didn't break it, that I was in terrible pain. Toys are meant to be played. It's okay if it's broken. She didn't quite believe it. Really? Really? I sat in a chair not far from her. Can I stay with you for a while? She thought for a moment and nodded. We were silent for a long time. She suddenly asked, "Are you really my mother?" My fingers tightened. Yes. Then why are you here now? The question finally came. I knew she would ask, but when I really heard it, I was still speechless in pain. Because someone told me that you are gone. I said, "I thought you died the day you were born." The stars widened their eyes. Dead. I nodded. They lied to me. She looked at me as if trying to understand the matter. Then you don't want me? No. My voice trembled. I never wanted you. The stars lowered their heads and hugged the little dinosaur tightly. But Aunt G said, "You sold me." She lied to you. She also said that if I don't obey, you will come back and throw me away. I closed my eyes. The chest was like being burned. I won't throw you away. The stars did not speak. She slowly took out a photo from under her pillow. The photo is old and has creases in the corners. She handed me the photo. She showed me every night. I took it. The photo shows me 5 years ago. I was 7 months pregnant and standing in the hospital corridor, pale and holding my stomach in my hand. The photo was taken secretly. I went back to the back. There is a line of words on it. The handwriting is very heavy, as if it has been carved hard. Her life is exchanged for Shen Yan's inheritance. I stared at the line, and the blood cooled down little by little. There was suddenly a very light footstep outside the door. I looked up sharply. The door was not closed tightly. Outside the crack of the door, a shadow flashed quickly. Someone has been eavesdropping. When I chased out, the hallway was empty. The old house of the Fu family is too big. All the lights are on at night, but it still feels cold. I stood in the middle of the hallway, holding the photo in my hand. The stars chased to the door, their little faces turning white. Aunt Xiao Xiao. She didn't dare to call me mom yet. I turned around and hugged her. This was the first time she didn't dodge. Her body is very light, not like a 4.5-year-old child. I held her with only one thought in my heart. I must take her away. No matter how big the Fu family is, no matter how much Shen Yan hides, no matter who is behind it, my daughter can't stay here anymore. Shen Yan arrived quickly. When he saw the photo in my hand, his face sank. Who gave it to her? You should ask. Who scares her with this picture every day? I handed him the photo. When he saw the words behind him, his eyes were completely cold. Her life is exchanged for Shen Yan's inheritance. Shen Yan read this sentence in a low voice. I looked at him. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. This silence made me even angrier. Shenan, do you still want to hide it from me? He looked up at me. 5 years ago, I was identified by Mr. Fu as the official heir of the Fu family. So what? At that time, there were many people within the Fu family who opposed me. They think I am not of the orthodox blood of the Fu family and should not be in control. What does that have to do with my children? Shen Yan's fingers slowly tightened the photo. They think you and the child are my weaknesses. I laughed. Not because it's funny, it's because it's ridiculous. So in order to make you have no weaknesses, they stole my daughter, lied to me that she was dead, and then used her to tie you up. Shen Yan's face was very white. They'll find out. You always say this. I looked at him, my voice cold and hard. 5 years ago, I was waiting for you with a child. The Fu family said you don't want me. Now you say you don't know. My daughter was stolen. You said you only know now. Shen Yan, is it possible to push away all sins in your world as long as you don't know a word? He did not refute. The stars stood behind me, too scared to move. I lowered my voice. Sorry, stars. She shook her head. I'm not afraid of you. This sentence made my heart soften, but the next second, she added another sentence. I'm afraid of them. I followed her gaze to the end of the hallway. There was no one there, but I know that there are eyes everywhere in this old house. The next morning, the lawyer arrived. Shen Yan's people also retrieved my old mobile phone. The phone was old and the screen was already cracked. I thought it wouldn't have been opened for a long time. The technician connects the equipment and exports the data inside little by little. I sat on the couch with cold hand. The boat sat next to me, and the star sat next to him. The two children were close to each other. The boat handed the milk to the stars. You drink. The star whispered. I can't drink too much sweet. This is not sweet. Really? Really? My mother said that children need to drink milk to grow taller. The star looked down at the carton of milk. It's like looking at a very precious gift. I looked at her, and my eyes were hot again. Shen Yan sat opposite. He also looked at the stars. There was pain and regret in those eyes. I don't want to look at him. If regret is useful, these 4.5 years will not turn into a knife. The technician finally said. The video is back. Everyone looked at the screen. The picture is very shaky. The lights in the hospital corridors are dazzling. I could hear my rapid breathing in the video. I was holding on to the wall, and the phone camera kept shaking. At the end of the corridor, a woman came out with a swaddling arm. She was wearing a hat and mask, and her face was not visible, but she had a scar on the inside of her right wrist. I stared at the scar. Ji Ruowei stood next to him. His face had changed. She is still holding on. What does this prove? There are many people with scars. The video continues to play. The woman walked to the staircase with the child in her arms. She turned her face sideways and slid her mask down a little, although it was only a short second. The face was clear enough. Ji Ruowei. There was a dead silence in the hall. The boat grabbed my hand suddenly. The star looked at the screen, and the milk in his hand fell to the ground. Ji Ruowei took a step back. It's not me. Shin Yen stood up. His eyes were like ice. You still want to say it's not you? Ji Ruowei shook her head. Videos can be faked. Shin Yen. This must have been done by her. She hates me. She wants to grab the stars. I looked at her and suddenly felt calm. Ji Ruowei. Do you know why I didn't rush to scold you? She stared at me. I said, because scolding you is too light. I want to see you crushed by the evidence little by little. Her face turned pale. Old Mrs. Fu sat in the main seat with a cane. She didn't speak from beginning to end. I looked at her. Old lady, don't you explain? She said lightly. One video doesn't tell the whole story. Ruowei is young and ignorant. Maybe she is just instructed. Ji Ruowei looked at her suddenly. That glance is complicated. Shock, fear, and resentment. I caught this look. Who did you instruct me to do? Old Mrs. Fu did not answer. Shin Yen said coldly. Watch Ji Ruowei. The bodyguard stepped forward. Ji Ruowei screamed. You can't do this to me. Shin Yen. I have been with the stars for 4.5 years. When she was sick, I was watching over her. Why did you treat me like this because of this woman? Shin Yen looked at her. Because you stole her child. Ji Ruowei's eyes were red. I stole her child. What about you? Haven't you also acquiesced in the past few years? You obviously doubted the identity of the star, but you didn't find out to the end. You are also afraid of the truth. The Fu family scandal, and your inheritance affected. Shin Yan's face turned pale. This sentence was like a knife, piercing into his heart and me at the same time. I looked at Shin Yan. He did not deny it. At this moment, the last bit of shaking in my heart was gone. Ji Ruowei is the murderer. The Fu family is an accomplice. And Shin Yan, even if he is not the one who took the initiative to hurt me, he is not completely innocent. He has the ability to check, but he didn't find out in time. My child paid for it for 4.5 years. I got up and pulled the boat and the stars. I'm going to take them out of here. Old Mrs. Fu finally spoke. Stars can't go. I turned to look at her. You said it do. Doesn't count. She was raised in the Fu family. She was stolen, deceived, and intimidated in the Fu family. I said, it's not raising, it's captivity. Old Mrs. Fu's face sank. Xiao, don't be too presumptuous. I laughed. Why didn't you feel presumptuous when you stole the child? Shin Yan walked up to me. I'll arrange a car. I don't take your car. He stopped. I said, I'll take the kids to the hotel. The lawyer followed me. Until the police arrive, I will not let them stay in the Fu family again. Shin Yan looked at me, as if he wanted to say something. In the end, he only said, I asked someone to protect you. I didn't refuse. I'm not a gambler. I want to protect my 2 children. As long as it works, I use it. When I left the Fu family, the stars kept holding my hand. Her hands are small and cold. When she walked to the door, she looked back at the old house. She whispered, can I not come back? I squatted down and looked at her carefully. As long as you don't want to, Mom won't let you come back. This time, I said Mom. The stars looked at me. She didn't correct it. She just nodded slowly. I picked her up. The boat grabbed the corner of my clothes. At that moment, I felt like I was holding a lost half-life, but I know that this is just the beginning. At noon that day, Ji Ruowei's counterattack came. Online news, TV news, mobile phone push. All my photos appeared. The title is harsh. An ordinary woman broke into the Fu family with an illegitimate child, suspected of competing for the property of a wealthy family. The identity of the Fu family's little daughter's biological mother is a mystery. Shen is familiar with the return of his old lover, and the 4-year-old boy may lead to an inheritance turmoil. The article said that I took the money and left. He said that I now see Shin Yen in power, and he came back with his son to ask for a title. He also said that I was mentally unstable and had threatened the Fu family many times. Those words are poisonous. Every sentence is like a design knife. The reporter was quickly surrounded downstairs of the hotel. They blocked the door and called, my name, Miss Xiao. Did you really accept money from the Fu family back then? Are you back for your children's inheritance? Do you still have a relationship with Mr. Shen? Did you deliberately let your son get close to the Shen family? I closed the curtains. Xiao Zhou stood by the window, his little face tense. Mom, why do they say that about you? I walked over and hugged him. Because some people are afraid that the truth will come out. Xingxing sat on the bed, his face very pale. Did I harm you? I walked over distressfully. No, she whispered. If I hadn't been alive, it wouldn't have been like this. My heart hurts suddenly. I hold her shoulder. Stars, you can't say that. You are alive, which is the best news my mother has heard in recent years. All bad things are not your fault. She looked at me. Her eyes slowly red. But they said, I'm Aunt J's child. They were wrong. Then whose child am I? I took her into my arms with Xiao Zhou. You are my child. Also your own. You don't belong to the Fu family, nor do you belong to Ji Ruowei. Xiao Zhou immediately said, You are my sister. The stars looked at him. Xiaozhou stuffed his little dinosaur into her arms. Whoever says you're not good, I'll bite him. Xingxing was stunned for a moment. Then she laughed for the first time. Very shallow, like a small lamp that was about to go out. It finally lit up a little again. I decided to be interviewed. Shen Yan's lawyer disagreed. He said that the emotions outside are too intense now, and it is risky to speak out publicly. Shen Yan also came to the hotel. He stood at the door and did not come in. Xiao. Let me deal with it. I looked at him. How to deal with it? I will ask the media to withdraw the manuscript. I will make the paternity test public. And I will hold Ji Ruowei accountable. Then everyone will say, I rely on you to whitewash my name. She was silent. I said, Shenan. I'm not the person you saved 5 years ago. I don't need you to speak for me. I want them to hear my voice. He looked at me for a long time. What do you want to do? I want to make all the evidence public. It will be dangerous. I hid for 5 years. But you still found me. Hiding is useless. I walked to the window and pulled back a little of the curtain. The flashing lights downstairs immediately turned on. I want to stand up. Shen Yan looked at me and lowered his voice. I'll accompany you. No, I said. You stand next to me. And they will only look at you. I'm going to say it alone. Finally. The interview was scheduled in the hotel conference room, not entertainment media. It is a Beijing-based correspondent for a foreign news organization. I chose them because I needed to speak as fully as possible and not be cut into what others wanted. When the camera turned on, I sat up straight. My palms are full of sweat, but I didn't bow my head. The reporter asked, do you admit that you accepted money from the Fu family 5 years ago and left Mr. Shen? I said, no. Have you ever taken the initiative to give up on your daughter? No. Are you speaking out publicly today to win for Mr. Shen or for your children? I looked at the camera. For the truth. And for my children. I took out Xiao's upbringing record after birth, rental contract, kindergarten payment slip, hospital bill, my salary for odd jobs. There is also a record of hospitalization from 5 years ago. Everything is ordinary. It's so ordinary that it doesn't look like wealthy news. It is these ordinary things that prove what kind of life I have lived in the past few years. I said, if I were really for money, I wouldn't live with my son in a leaky house for 4.5 years. I said, if I really abandon my daughter, I won't immediately return to the place that makes me miserable the moment I know she is alive. I said, if I really want to cling to the Fu family, I won't ask for the police. I won't ask for the release of hospital records. And I won't ask to find out everyone involved in stealing the child. Finally, I looked at the camera. I'm not here to ask the Fu family to recognize me. I am here to get my daughter back. And I am here to tell everyone who has hurt me that I will no longer be silent. After the interview was released, public opinion began to change. Someone is still scolding me. But more people began to ask why the Fu family did not disclose hospital records. Why did Ji Ruowei say that she was abroad? But she couldn't come up with a complete itinerary. Why did the paternity test show that the child she called her daughter was not related to her? In the afternoon, Shen Yan's legal team issued a statement. There was no emotional story for me in the statement. Just list 3 things. First, the paternity test confirmed that Xiaozhou and Xingxing were both Shen Yan's biological children and twins. Second, 5 years ago, the hospital video showed that Ji Ruowei had taken away the baby girl. Third, the Fu family has submitted preliminary evidence to the police and applied for a reinvestigation of the birth records and custody documents of that year. These 3 things were like 3 stones, smashing the story Ji Ruowei had made up. Ji Ruowei was photographed leaving through the back door of the Fu family. Her face pale. She tried to get in the car, but was questioned by reporters. Miss Ji, did you steal Ms. Xiao's daughter? Why did you let a child who was not related by blood call you aunt? Were you really abroad back then? Ji Ruowei did not answer. She rushed into the car and the door closed. But this is not the end. In the evening, Shannon sent someone to continue repairing the video. I thought we had seen the most crucial part, but the technician told me that there was another voice in the second half of the video. The original audio is too messy and they processed it for a long time. At 9 o'clock in the evening, Shen Yan came to the hotel with a computer. The children are already asleep. The stars slept next to the boat, holding a baby dinosaur in their hands. I gently closed the bedroom door and walked to the living room. Shen Yan stood there. He looked tired. There are new results. I sit down. Let it go. He pressed play. The screen is still a hospital corridor. After Ji Ruowei left with the baby girl in her arms, the camera shook and fell to the ground. The picture only shows the ground and a few pairs of shoes. But the sound was much clearer than before. A nurse lowered her voice and said, "The baby boy is still in the delivery room. What should I do?" Another man replied. The old lady said that the baby girl should be left and the baby boy would be disposed of. My blood froze instantly. The baby boy is disposed of. Small boat. They didn't just steal my daughter. They also want to kill my son. I clung to the edge of the couch and my nails were almost broken. In the 6th Deo, the nurse's voice trembled. "This is a living child." The man said, "Give me money." "Shut up. The Fu family will not treat you badly." Then came the sound of paper rubbing. It's like someone stuffed a bank card over. At the end of the shot, The toe of the man's shoe appears in the frame. Black leather shoes with a very special silver buckle on the side of the shoe. Shen Yan stood up suddenly. His face was whiter than mine. I looked up at him. Do you know? He didn't speak, but his silence has given me the answer. I looked at the shoes on the screen and listened to the sound that was still familiar after being processed. I recognized it too. 5 years ago, I met this person in the Fu family's old house. He stood behind Mrs. Fu, lowered his eyebrows and served tea for her. He is the land butler. He is also one of the most trusted people around Shen Yan over the years. On the computer, Butler Lu's voice continued to sound. Remember, a baby girl cannot die. She will be useful later. I was chilled. Shen Yan stretched out his hand to help me. I opened his hand. Don't touch me. He froze. I stared at him. My eyes red. Shen Yan, tell me, your housekeeper, your Fu family, your Ji Ruowei. How many of you still want me and my children to die? Shen Yan opened his mouth, but couldn't speak. At this moment, the cry of the stars suddenly came from the bedroom. She was awakened by a nightmare and shouted, don't get an injection. I'm obedient. I won't call my mother. I rushed into the bedroom. The stars sat on the bed, their faces full of tears. Her sleeves slipped down. I saw a row of shallow pinholes on her thin arm. I grabbed the star's arm and my whole body froze. Her skin is very white and thin. The row of pinholes fell shallowly on the inside of the arm, like a few small dots that were about to disappear. But I know that it is not an ordinary minor injury. Why do a 4.5-year-old child have so many pinholes? The stars trembled with tears. She seemed to be still in a dream. Her eyes open, but she couldn't see me clearly. She desperately shrank towards the corner of the bed. I'm obedient. I don't cry. I won't call my mother. Don't get any more injections. The last bit of reason in my heart was broken. I took her into my arms and covered her eyes with my hand. The stars are me. Mom is here. Her body stiffened. Then she cried softly. This time, she didn't call me Aunt Xiao Xiao. She grabbed my clothes like a life-saving rope. Mom. I burst into tears. I'm here. I'm really here. Xiao Zhou also woke up. He sat up, saw the stars crying, and immediately crawled over. Sister, don't be afraid. He stuffed the baby dinosaur into her arms. The bad guys are not here. The stars cried even harder. She is not making trouble. She was afraid for too long and finally dared to cry. Shen Yan stood at the door, his face pale. I looked back at him. Call the doctor. His eyes fell on the star's arm. At that moment, I saw an almost uncontrollable pain in his eyes, but I no longer had the strength to see his pain. I just want to know how my daughter has been treated for the past 4.5 years. The doctor came soon. Not the Fu family's personal doctor. Shen Yan found a child expert from outside, as well as 2 nurses. As soon as the stars saw the doctor, they hid in my arms. She was shaking all over. The doctor also saw it and immediately lowered his voice. Children, I don't get injections. I just look at your hands. Okay. The stars don't speak. I held her. Mom is with you. She slowly stretched out her hand. After examining the arm, the doctor took another blood draw. The stars are so frightened that their faces turn blue. When the blood was drawn, she bit her lip and didn't dare to say a word. I touched her head. If it hurts, cry. She shook her head. If you cry, you will be scolded. When I heard this, my eyes instantly turned red. Who scolded you? She lowered her head and said nothing. I didn't force her. The doctor sent the examination report to the laboratory as soon as possible. That night, I didn't sleep. The stars sleep in my arms, and the boat sleeps on the other side of me. The 2 children were close to me, one left and one right. I looked down at their faces. They were obviously children born on the same day. Although Xiao Zhou has suffered with me, he can laugh, make trouble, act coquettishly, and get angry. The star is like a bird locked in a glass box. She didn't even dare to cry too loudly. I remembered the voice in that video. The baby boy is disposed of. The baby girl stayed. She will be useful later. My fingers slowly tightened. My children, from birth, have been used as tools by them. The next morning, the test results came out. The doctor put the report in front of me with a heavy expression. There are traces of long-term use of sedative drugs in the child's body. My brain buzzed. What do you mean? The doctor glanced at Shen Yan and then at me. This drug should not be given to children for a long time. In particular, it should not be used without a clear condition. Children are now weak, slow to respond, and emotionally depressed, which may be related to long-term improper medication. I looked down at the report. I know those words one by one, but when connected, I feel like I can't understand it. Long-term, do not use drugs. Children, the star is only 4.5 years old. I asked, who used it for her? The doctor said, she needs to check her past medication records. She has many pinholes on her body, which means that it is not once or twice. I looked up at Shen Yan, who is the doctor of the Fu family. Shen Yan's voice was very cold. The old lad's personal doctor, surnamed Han. Find him. Someone has been sent. I stood up. I'll go too. Shen Yan stopped me. You go with the child first. I stayed with her all night. I looked at him. Now I want to know who harmed her. He didn't stop him anymore. When we rushed back to the Fu family's old house, Mrs. Fu was already sitting in the hall. She seemed to have known that we would come. Ji Ruowei is also here. She still had red marks on her face from being beaten by me yesterday, but she didn't pretend to be weak today. When she saw me, her eyes were full of resentment. Xiao. Do you still dare to come? I threw the report in front of her. Explain. Ji Ruowei glanced down, and her face changed, but she quickly sneered. Xingxing has been in poor health. What's so strange about taking medicine? I walked up to her. What kind of illness is she? She has been frail since she was a child. What disease? Ji Ruowei didn't speak. I took a step closer. What is the name of the disease? Where is the medical certificate? Which doctor prescribes medicine? You say, she was asked and stepped back. Old Mrs. Fu finally spoke. Enough. The treatment of the star has always been in the hands of doctors. You are not a doctor and are not qualified to question. I turned to look at her. I'm her mother. Old Mrs. Fu's face darkened. Your mother came too late. This sentence is like a knife. But this time, I was not stabbed back. I looked at her and said word by word. You made me late. The hall was quiet. Shen Yan walked up to me. Where's Dr. Han? Old Mrs. Fu said. He went abroad. When? Yesterday. Shen Yan's eyes were cold. So coincident. Old Mrs. Fu looked up at him. Shinin, are you interrogating me now? Yes. His answer was direct. Old Mrs. Fu's face changed completely. I'm your grandmother. Shen Yan looked at her. His voice was very flat. You are also suspected of concealing child abduction and long-term improper drug use. Old Mrs. Fu stood up suddenly. Presumptuous. She raised her hand to hit Shen Yan. Shen Yan did not hide, but the slap did not fall. I grabbed Mrs. Fu's wrist. She looked at me in shock. Do you dare to stop me? If you dare to touch my child, I will dare to stop you. I shook off her hand. Old lady. Your Fu family is decent, but none of what you do is decent. Ji Ruowei suddenly smiled. Xiao, what are you pretending to be as a mother now? Where are you in the Fu family in the past few years? When she had a fever, I hugged her. When she did the examination, I was with her. When she couldn't sleep, I told her stories. I stared at her. Then why did you give her medicine? I didn't. Ji Ruowei screamed. It was the doctor who said she needed to be quiet. She was timid and cried. When she cries, it will affect the old lattice rest. And it will also annoy Shin. The doctor just told her to sleep better. My blood cooled down little by little. She said it herself. It's not that she doesn't know. She always knew. She knew the stars didn't need those medicines. She just thought the child was crying. She just needs a quiet, obedient, weak, easily controllable child. I raised my hand and slapped her again. This time, heavier than the last time. Ji Ruowei was beaten to the sofa. Old Mrs. Fu said angrily. Xiao. I looked back at her. Shout again. And I'll beat you too. Everyone in the hall was stunned. Old Mrs. Fu was so angry that her face turned blue. Shen Yan looked at me and didn't stop me. I know I'm crazy now, but if a mother can calm down when she sees her child being harmed like this, then she is really crazy. Ji Ruowei covered her face and cried. Shinin, just watch her beat me. I paid so much for the stars, and now you all blame me. Shen Yan's voice had no trace of temperature. What you pay is a lie. Ji Ruowei's tears stopped for a moment. What do you mean? You use the stars to stay in the Fu family, use her illness and weakness to win sympathy, and use her to tie up my marriage contract with the Fu family. Shen Yan looked at her. Do you think I can't find out? Ji Ruowei's face turned pale. Shen Yan continued. You asked the doctor to give her sedatives for a long time, making her look fragile and making the Fu family feel that she can't live without you. You lie to everyone that she is the child you fought hard to give birth to. You treat other people's daughters as your ticket to marry into the Fu family. Ji Ruowei shook her head. No. It's not like that. I looked at her coldly. What is that? She suddenly looked at old Mrs. Fu. Old lady, say something. Back then, you said that the stars must stay in the Fu family, and you said that only in this way would Shin Yen be obedient. Old Mrs. Fu's face changed. Shut up. Ji Ruowei was already panicked. You tell me to shut up now. When you brought the child back, you asked me to take care of her. You said that as long as I do well, let me marry Shinin. There was a dead silence in the hall. I looked at Mrs. Fu. So you admit it? Old Mrs. Fu looked at me coldly. I didn't admit anything. I picked up my phone. It's okay. I recorded all these words just now. Ji Ruowei looked at me suddenly. You record? Yes. I looked at her. Your Fu family likes to forge documents. I can only learn to leave evidence. Ji Ruowei rushed over and wanted to grab the phone. Shen Yan's bodyguard stopped her. She screamed like crazy. Xiao, do you think you won? You're just a woman with no background. You can't fight the Fu family. I looked at her. I used to think so too. I took a step forward. So I hid for 5 years. But now I don't hide. I pressed the police number. This time. Not a threat. It was really dialed out. Old Mrs. Fu wanted people to close the door. Shen Yan spoke first. Whoever dares to stop her, get out of the Fu family today. His words were more useful than old Mrs. Fu's. The servants and bodyguards stopped. Old Mrs. Fu looked at him in disbelief. Shen Yan. You want to betray the Fu family for her. Shen Yan looked at her. I didn't betray the Fu family. His voice was low, but clear. It was the Fu family who betrayed me. Before the police arrived, Mrs. Fu still wanted to keep things down. She asked someone to take Ji Ruowei away. I blocked the door. No one is allowed to leave. Old Mrs. Fu sneered. Do you think calling the police will solve everything? Xiao. You are so naive. The Fu family has the Fu family's methods. I looked at her. Then let everyone see what the Fu family's method is. I turned on the live broadcast on my phone. In the picture, the Fu family hall is refined. Old Mrs. Fu sat in the main seat. Ji Ruowei was stopped by bodyguards, and Shen Yan stood beside me. I pointed the camera at myself. Hello everyone. Xiao. Many people quickly poured into the live broadcast room. Comments are flashing quickly. I didn't look at it. I just said, yesterday I released the video of my daughter being taken away. Today, I got the examination report of her long-term mismedication. Now I'm in the Fu family's old house. I have called the police. If something happens to me and my child, please remember that everyone here is suspicious. Old Mrs. Fu's face changed drastically. Turn it off. She asked the servant to come up and grab the phone. Shen Yan's people blocked it. I continued. It's not a family affair. This is the harm of children, the falsification of birth records, and the illegal control of children. The Fu family wants to close the door to solve it, but I don't agree. The number of people in the live broadcast room is increasing. Many people start recording their screens. I know there are risks in doing so. I could be scolded even worse, but I have to open the door. The horror of the Fu family comes from the closed door. As long as the door is open and the light enters, they can no longer deal with a woman and 2 children as casually as they used to. The police came. Doctors' reports, videos, and audio recordings were all submitted. Ji Ruowei was taken to cooperate with the investigation. When she passed by me, she suddenly stopped. Her eyes were poisonous. Xiao, you will regret it. I said, what I regret the most is that I didn't see you clearly 5 years ago. She was taken away. Mrs. Fu was not taken away for the time being due to physical reasons, but the police asked her to cooperate with the investigation and not leave the capital. I left the Fu family with my children. This time, the stars did not look back. Shen Yan arranged for us to live in a villa under his name. I didn't want to accept it, but there are security, doctors, child psychologists. I can't gamble on the safety of my children. The villa is quiet. For the first time, the star had his own room. She stood in front of the pink bed, as if she didn't know what to do. The boat led her. You can sit down. The star whispered. Can I put the baby dinosaur on my pillow? I squatted down. Yes. Will it get dirty? If it gets dirty, wash it. What if it breaks? The boat will be repaired. If you can't fix it, your mother will buy you a new one. The stars looked at me, their eyes turning red a little. Is it really possible to sleep here? I held back my tears. Yes, you can sleep as long as you want in the future. She slowly climbed onto the bed and lay down carefully, as if I was afraid that this bed would be suddenly taken away. At night, she slept restlessly. I was by my side. Shen Yan stood at the door. He didn't come in. I know he's looking at the stars. After a long time, he whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't look at him. You shouldn't have said this to me. You should say to them, I will. Don't say yes. Do it for me. He was silent for a while. I have frozen all cooperation projects of the Ji family. Butler Lu was also controlled. I will check the old school of the Fu family one by one. I finally looked up. Did Butler Lu admit it? No. Where is old Mrs. Fu? No. I sneered. Of course. People like them will not bow their heads until the end. Shen Yan looked at me. He'll send them where they need to go. I said, Shenan, you had better do it. I will. I stood up and walked up to him. One more thing. You say, if one day, at the end of the investigation, you are among the people who hurt the child. His eyes hurt. I looked at him and said word by word, I won't let you go. He didn't hide. Okay. I turned around and went back to the bed. The stars grabbed my hand in their sleep. I immediately squeezed her. At that moment, I heard Shen Yan say very softly, Xiao, I'm not here to rob the child. I didn't look back. He said, I am here to atone for my sins. I closed my eyes. Atonement. These 2 words are too heavy. It's not that you can say it counts. The next day, Butler Lu was officially taken away for questioning. Shen Yan went to see him in person. I didn't go. I stayed in the villa to accompany the child for a psychological evaluation. The situation with the stars was worse than I thought. She is afraid of talking loudly. The sound of doors closing, the sudden approach of adults, white pills and needles. Doctors said it would take her a long time to recover. I asked, can it return to the way normal children are? The doctor did not give an absolute answer. She only said, as long as the environment is safe and the care is stable, the child will slowly get better. Slowly. I hate these 2 words the most now, because the child's pain is added day by day. It can be cured, but it can only be done slowly. In the afternoon, Shen Yan came back. His face was wrong. The first time I saw him, I knew something was wrong. Butler Lu said. Shen Yan put a voice recorder on the table. He didn't say it directly. Then what is this? Before he was taken away, he left it to you. I frowned. Give it to me. Shin Yan nodded. He said that only if you listen will you know where the real starting point is. I press record. First, there was a noise. Then there was Ji Ruowei's cry. I just stole the girl. The person who really caused Shin Yan's car accident was not me. Then an old voice sounded. I recognize it. It's Lu Butler. Of course not you. Ji Ruowei asked. Who is that? Butler Lu was silent for a few seconds, and his voice was very low. That car accident was originally arranged by Shin Yan's biological mother. The recording stopped. The living room was terribly quiet. I slowly looked up and looked at Shin Yan. His face was no longer bloody. I have never seen such a Shin Yan. It was like someone cut off tea. He last support on his body with a knife. I asked, your mother. Shin Yan did not speak. I asked again, Shinan, who is your biological mother? He finally spoke. The voice was very hoarse. Shin Man. I've heard the name. In the old rumors of the capital, Shin Man is a woman who is famous for her beauty and crazy. When she was young, she had a deep relationship with the Fu family, but then suddenly disappeared, and the outside world said that she was in bad spirits and was recuperating abroad. I looked at Shin Yan. So 5 years ago, you didn't suddenly want me. He closed his eyes. I was in a car accident on my way to find you. My breathing stopped. Looking for me. I knew you were taken away by the Fu family that day. They'll drive to the hospital to find you. He looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot. I'm not here. I suddenly felt very cold. The truth is like a net. I thought I had seen the edge, but now I have discovered that there is a deeper black hole behind the net. Shin Yan's biological mother. Shin Man. Why did she harm her son? And why destroy me and my 2 children? Before I could ask out, the sound of stars came from the bedroom. Mom. She woke up. I got up immediately, but when I walked to the door, I heard her whisper, I've seen that grandma before. I stopped. Star stood by the bed holding the baby dinosaur. She looked at Shin Yan. Her voice was very soft. She said if I was good, Dad would come back. Shin Yan froze. The star continued. She also said that my mother shouldn't have lived. After Xingxing said that, Shin Yan didn't move for a long time. I looked at him and suddenly felt that fate was absurd. I used to think that the person who hurt me was Shin Yan. Later, I learned that it was Ji Ruowei, Mrs. Fu, and Butler Lu. Now, a new name has emerged. Shin Man. Shin Yan's biological mother. A mother arranged for her son's car accident. A woman ruined the lives of another mother and 2 children. I picked up the stars. When did she see the grandma you mentioned? The stars thought for a long time. When I was little. Is it in the Fu family? She nodded. She has been here a few times. Aunt Ji didn't let me say. What did she do to you? The stars bowed their heads. I don't remember. She said she didn't remember, but her fingers were already shaking. I didn't continue to ask. The psychiatrist said that she could not be forced to recall. I kissed her forehead. It's okay. If you can't think of it, you don't want to. Shin Yan stood in place. His voice very soft. I'll go find her. I looked at him. I'll go too. No. He refused almost immediately. I looked at him coldly. Shinan. I'm not asking for your consent. He looked at me. Shin Man is very dangerous. Isn't the Fu family dangerous? Isn't Ji Ruowei dangerous? Isn't Butler Lu dangerous? I said. I hid, and they didn't let me go. Shin Yan was silent. I continued. She harmed you and me and my children. I am entitled to know the truth. In the end, he didn't stop it anymore. Shin Man lives in a private house on the outskirts of the city. A lot of white roses are planted outside. The weather was already warm in May, but the house gave it a cold feeling. When we arrived, Shin Man was pruning flower branches. She wore a long black dress and her hair was neatly styled. She doesn't look like the rumored person at all. She is sober. It was also very calm. She looked up and saw Shin Yan. Her eyes not surprised, like I knew he would come. You're finally here. Shin Yan stood in front of her. Did you arrange the car accident? Shin Man cut a white rose. The flower fell to the ground. As soon as you see me, ask this. Answer me. Shin Man looked at him and smiled softly. Yes. My heart sank. She admitted it too quickly. It's scary. Shin Yan's fingers slowly tightened. Why? Shin Man put down the scissors. Because you were going to ruin yourself at that time. If I go to Xiao Xiao, I will ruin myself. Yes. Her eyes fell on me. The eyes were very light, but there was a kind of cold from above. She is pregnant with your child. When the Fu family finds out, they will definitely make a fuss about her. You just got the right to inherit and the foundation is unstable. If you turn against the Fu family for her, you will lose everything. I looked at her. So you decided to make me lose everything. Shin Man looked at me. You shouldn't have been around him in the first place. I laughed. I have heard this sentence many times. Can you people only use this sentence to prove your nobility? Shin Man's eyes were cold. Xiao Xiao, you don't know the Fu family. Of course I don't know. I said. I only know that normal people will not steal children for power, nor will they arrange car accidents for the future. Shin Man looked at Shin Yan. Look, she's still so naive. Shin Yan's voice was hoarse. Mother. As soon as this title was spoken, he felt like he had been stabbed. Have you ever thought that I would die? Shin Man was silent for a moment. I arranged for minor injuries. Shin smiled. That smile was cold. Minor injury. I was in a coma for 27 days and forgot about 3 months. Xiao Xiao was born prematurely in the hospital alone. The daughter was stolen and the son was almost disposed of. You tell me, this is a minor injury. The calm Anshan man's face finally cracked. I didn't let them touch the child. But you started this. Shen Yan approached her step by step. You let someone crash into my car. Give the Fu family a chance to block the news. Give the old lady a chance to force Xiao Xiao away. And give Ji Ruowei a chance to steal the stars. You now say you didn't let them touch the children. Shen Man's lips moved. I just want you to forget about her. I looked at her and suddenly understood. She didn't feel wrong. She only felt that things were out of control. She wanted to cut off me and Shen Yan. As for whether I will die or not, it doesn't matter. In her eyes, we are all just a price. I asked, did you come to me 5 years ago, when I was 8 months pregnant? Shen Man looked at me. I said, a woman in a black dress told me downstairs in the hospital that I would ruin Shen Yan if I stayed with him. She nodded slightly. It's me. The last question in my heart landed. Then did you know that I was about to give birth at that time? I know. Do you know that I was forced by the Fu family to have no place to live? I know. Did you know that after I gave birth to twins, the hospital told me that my daughter was dead? She was silent. I looked at her. You know, right? Shen Man did not answer. This is the answer. Shen Yan's eyes were closed. There was no expression on his face. But I knew that he was collapsing. Biological mother. These 4 words are too heavy. Some people crave their mother's love all their lives. Shen Yan is too. He is not a heartless person. It's just that the Fu family taught him too cold. And now, he found that the biggest wound on his body came from the person who gave him life. Shen Man suddenly said, Shenan, I am doing all this for you. Shen Yan opened his eyes. Don't say it for me anymore. Shen Man's emotions finally got out of control. Not for you. For whom? Do you know how I was kicked out by the Fu family back then? Do you know how I live alone abroad with you pregnant? The Fu family took away my youth, took away my dignity, and wanted to deny you. Why? She pointed at Shen Yan. I raised you. I sent you back to the Fu family. And I let you sit in that position. You should have gotten everything back for me. I listened to her words and felt a chill down my back. Does she love Shen Yan? Maybe loved, but this love has long become control. She didn't treat Shen Yan as a son. She uses him as a weapon. Shen Yan asked in a low voice. So I'm just a tool for your revenge. Shen Man's eyes were red. You are my son. My son will not be arranged by his mother to have a car accident. This sentence made Shen Man take a step back. She looked at Shen Yan, as if she had found out that he was out of control for the first time. You want to judge me for her? Shen Yan looked at me. Then he looked at his mother again. Not for her. His voice was hoarse, but very steady. It's for myself, for the me you designed, for Xiao Xiao, for the boat and the stars, also for all the people you used as pawns 5 years ago. The blood on Shen Man's face receded little by little. She suddenly laughed. Okay, you want the truth. I'll give it to you. She turned and walked into the house. We follow up. The interior of the house is very exquisitely furnished, but there is no sense of life. She took an old document bag from the study safe and threw it on the table. Haven't you always wondered, why does old Mrs. Fu hate you so much? Shen Yan didn't speak. Shen Man opened the document bag. Inside is a paternity test. Very old. The edges of the paper have yellowed. I glanced down. Appraisal object. Fu Chengyuan. Shen Yan. Probability of parental authority. 99.99. I was stunned. Fu Chengyuan is Mr. Fu. Shen Yan looked at the report. His pupils shrank slightly. Shen Man said, you are not the grandson of the Fu family, nor are you an outsider in their mouths. She said word by word. You are Fu Chengyuan's biological son. The air was like being evacuated. I suddenly understood a lot of things. Why did Mr. Fu insist on making Shen Yan the heir? Why did Mrs. Fu hate him so much? Why did the old Fu family want to pull him down? Why did Shen Man send him back to the Fu family? It turns out that this is not a simple inheritance. This is a scandal that has been hidden for years. Shen Yan looked at Shen Man. Why are you saying it now? Shen Man smiled. Because before you needed this secret, now you want to destroy the Fu family. Then let them destroy it too. Shen Yan's voice was very cold. You use my life experience as a bargaining chip. This was originally a bargaining chip. Shen Man said, what the Fu family owes me, what you owe you, should be repaid. You're wrong. Shen Yan picked up the appraisal. The Fu family owes you. You should ask for it yourself. You are not qualified to use me, Xiao Xiao, or children. Shen Man's eyes were gloomy. Do you think leaving the Fu family, what do you have left? Shen Yan didn't look at her again. At least I'm left with myself. When we left Shen Man's private house, it was already dark. It was quiet in the car. I sat in the back row and looked out the window. Shen Yan sat next to me. He still had the old paternity test in his hand. I know he's in pain at the moment, but I didn't comfort him. I'm not cold-blooded. It's just that along the way, I've been torn apart by the truth too many times. I don't have the extra strength to comfort someone who once had the power to protect me, but didn't. Shen Yan suddenly spoke. Xiao Xiao. I'm sorry. I looked out the window. You said it today, not for 5 years ago. He paused. It's because I used to think that standing high enough would protect you. I turned to look at him. He whispered. Now I know that the tall building itself is where you are hurt. I didn't speak. He looked at me. I will leave the Fu family. I was stunned for a moment. What? The board of directors will meet tomorrow. I will disclose evidence. Clean up the old Fu family. And cut off the business I founded. I looked at him. The Fu family will not agree. They don't need to agree. His voice regained a little coldness. They thought I was here today thanks to the Fu family, but they forgot that Fu's most profitable lines now were made by me. I suddenly understood. Shinya didn't want to escape. He was going to fight back. Not to rob the Fu family. It was to make the Fu family lose the ability to continue hurting people. The next day, Fu held an emergency board meeting. I didn't go into the conference room. I took my children to watch the live news at the villa. Shen Yan didn't let me come forward. He said that this time it was his battlefield. I agreed. I don't have to rush to the front every time. Some accounts should have been settled by him. In the news, the Fu building was full of reporters. The board met for 3 hours. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Shen Yan walked out of the conference room. He stood in front of the camera and made some of the evidence public. Ji Ruowei stole the baby girl. Lu Butler bought the hospital. Old Mrs. Fu hid the truth. Shen Man arranged a car accident. The Fu family uses children and marriage contracts to control inheritance. Every sentence is like thunder. The journalist almost went crazy. Someone asked, Mr. Shen, will you continue to serve as the CEO of FUS? Shen Yan looked at the camera. I will step down as CEO of Fu. The scene was in an uproar. He continued. At the same time, Chiming Technology, Beijing Medical Data Platform, and Galaxy Capital, which I personally founded and controlled, will be unbound from FUS. The reporter asked, does this mean that you and the Fu family have broken up? Shen Yan was silent for a second. I have never been the prince of the Fu family. He said, I am Shen Yan. I sat in front of the TV, and when I heard this, my heart moved slightly. Xiao Zhou asked me, Mom, is Dad not the crown prince? I touched his head. Yes. Then will he become poor? I was stunned for a moment. The stars also look up at me. I couldn't help but laugh. It probably won't be too poor. Xiao Zhou breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. He also had to buy milk for his sister. The star whispered, I can drink less. I hugged her distressfully. No need to drink less. Xiao Zhou said seriously, Dad can't afford it. I can buy it. I have New Year's money. The stars looked at him and smiled slowly. At that moment, I felt that the sun was finally shining a little, but I also know that it's not over yet. The Fu family will not fall easily. Ji Ruowei will not plead guilty easily. Shen Man won't be really quiet either. Sure enough, in the evening, the news came that Ji Ruowei was taken away by the police. At the same time, there was another news. Old Mrs. Fu fell ill and was admitted to a private hospital. She was not detained. She once again used her body as a shield. I wasn't surprised at all. In the evening, Shen Yan returned to the villa. 2 children are building blocks in the living room. When Xiao Zhou saw him, he immediately ran over. He stopped in front of Shen Yan and hesitated for a moment, then whispered, Dad. Shen Yan was still. I saw that his eyes were a little red. Xiao Zhou was a little embarrassed. Don't you like it? Shen Yan squatted down and took him into his arms. I like it. His voice was hoarse. I like it very much. The stars sat on the carpet and looked at them. Shen Yan was not in a hurry to hug her. He just walked over and squatted 1 step away from her. Star. I'm back. The stars looked at him. After a long time, she whispered, Dad. Shen Yan's fingers trembled, but he didn't cry. He just lowered his head and gently touched her little dinosaur. Are you afraid today? The stars shook their heads. Mom is here. Shen Yan glanced at me. I look away. That night, the 2 children slept more peacefully than before. When I went downstairs to pour water, I saw Shen Yan sitting in the living room. He held a document in his hand. There is also a ring on the table. I stopped. He found me and immediately put the ring away. I looked at him. Now is not the time. He was silent for 2 seconds. I know, Shenan. I haven't forgiven you yet. I know. Just because a child calls you dad doesn't mean I accept you. I know it too. He looked at me in a very soft voice. I just want you to know that I don't want to force you to turn back with a child. I said, preferably. He smiled bitterly. Xiao Xiao. I missed too much before. Now I don't ask you to believe me immediately. I only do. I didn't answer. The water in the glass is very cold. I held the cup and suddenly remembered 5 years ago. At that time, Shen Yan and I lived in a very small apartment. He doesn't say nice things, but in winter, he would put hot water next to my bed before I woke up. I thought it would be a lifetime. Later, he was torn apart for the rest of his life. Now he is standing in front of me, trying to pick up those pieces again. But I'm no longer the girl I used to be. I will no longer give myself to anyone's promises. The next day, Ji Ruowei was officially investigated. Butler Lu finally spoke. He explained some of the hospital's transactions that year. He said that Mrs. Fu asked to keep the baby girl in order to control Shen Yan. As for the baby boy, it was supposed to be sent away or directly caused by a medical accident, but I suddenly fled with the boat. They searched for a long time but couldn't find it. Later, in order to avoid making a big fuss, the Fu family chose to cover it up. When I listened to the lawyer's relay, My fingers were cold. It turns out that Xiaozhou is not lucky to be alive. He escaped from a group of wicked people. The stars did not escape. I held my 2 children for a long time. Xiaozhou asked, Mom, will the bad guys go to jail? I said, yes. The star asked, will they come back? I said, Mom won't let them come back. I thought this sentence would protect her. But that night, an accident happened. Stars suddenly have a high fever. She started convulsing halfway through her sleep. I picked her up and called her name. Stars. She didn't respond. Xiaozhou cried in fright. Mom, what's wrong with my sister? Shen Yan rushed in and immediately contacted the doctor and ambulance. In the hospital, the doctor did an emergency examination. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the doctor came out with a serious face. A rare drug residue was detected in the child's body. I held on to the wall. What do you mean? Didn't you stop taking the drug before? The doctor said. Not ordinary sedatives. This ingredient is more complex and should be consumed in small quantities over a long period of time. Now suddenly a high fever and convulsions may be a reaction after stopping the medication. Or it may be that someone has recently been exposed to her again. My mind went blank. What will happen? The doctor was silent for a moment. If you can't find the specific source and ingredient of the drug, it can cause nerve damage. Shen Yan's face became extremely cold. Check everyone who has been in contact with the stars. At this time, my phone rang. Unfamiliar numbers. I picked it up. Old Mrs. Fuss' voice came from inside. She was weak, but she still carried that familiar high-mindedness. Xiao. If you want to save the stars, come to the Fu family's old house. I held my phone tightly. Did you give the medicine? She smiled softly. I'm just keeping what can save her. What do you want? Let Shen Yan return Fu to me. I looked at Shen Yan. He had already heard it. Old Mrs. Fu continued. An hour. If it is outdated, I do not guarantee whether the child will wake up. The phone hung up. The lights in the hospital corridors were dazzlingly white. Shen Yan turned around and was about to leave. I grabbed him. Where are you going? Go get the medicine. You want to promise her? His eyes were gloomy. I can't bet on the stars. I looked at him. Then you want her to win. Shen Yan didn't speak. I'm afraid too. I was so scared that my whole body was shaking. In the ward, my daughter was lying on the hospital bed with a high fever. I want to save her more than anyone else. But I know that a person like Mrs. Fu, once she wins, there will be a second time. She wants Fu today. Tomorrow I will have children. I slowly let go of Shen Yan's hand. This time, we don't trade children. He looked at me. I said, let's talk about the evidence. Shen Yan looked at me, with a struggle in his eyes. I knew he wanted to rush to the Fu family immediately. I think too, if Mrs. Fu really has an antidote in her hand, I am willing to kneel down and beg her. But I know better that what she wants to see most is that we are out of control. She used the stars to force Shen Yan to hand over the Fu family. This is not the first time she has used her child as a bargaining chip. If we bow our heads this time, she will know that children will always be our weakness. She would put the knife on the child again and again. I can't let her win again. I grabbed Shen Yan's hand. Listen to me. His hands were cold. Xiao. The stars can't wait too long. I know. Then what are you going to do? I took a deep breath. Find Dr. Han. He's already gone abroad. Did he really go abroad? I asked. Old Mrs. Fu, such a cautious person, will let go of the only doctor who knows the ingredients of the drug. Shen Yan's eyes changed. I continued. If she dares to call and threaten us, it means that she thinks we can't find the real source of medicine. But she said that she kept what could save the stars, which was not necessarily the antidote. It may also be information. Shen Yan immediately looked at the assistant. Dr. Chahan's last entry and exit record. Don't just look at the open system. Check private flights. Check medical association registrations. Check his family. The assistant immediately called. I turned to the doctor. How long are the stars? We are stabilizing her body temperature and nerve response. The doctor said, it is best to determine the composition of the drug within 6 hours. 6 hours. Old Mrs. Fu only gave us 1 hour to force us to mess up, but the doctor gave us 6 hours. This is the opportunity. One walked to the front of the ward. The star was lying on the bed, and his little face was burning red. Xiaozhou sat on a chair, his eyes swollen from crying. When he saw me, he immediately stood up. Mom, will my sister die? I crouched down and held his hand. No, he said. But she doesn't wake up. The doctor is saving her. Mom is also trying to figure out a way. Xiaozhou wiped his tears hard. What can I do? I touched his head. Talk to her. Can she hear it? I can hear it. Xiaozhou immediately climbed to the bedside. He held Xingxing's hand and whispered, Sister, wake up quickly. It'll give you all the little dinosaurs. You wake up. I won't grab milk with you in the future. I turned my face and tears fell, but I only allowed myself to cry for 3 seconds. Then I wiped away my tears. Now is not the time to crash. I walked out of the ward and began to recall every word the star had said. She said that grandma had been to the Fu family. She said, don't get injections. She said that Aunt Ji said that if she was disobedient, her mother would throw her away. She also said that Dad would come back. There must be clues in these words. Mrs. Fu's personal doctor came to the old house every week. Star long-term medication. If Dr. Han was really involved, He couldn't have left records only in the hospital. There must still be medicine in the Fu family's old house. Maybe in a private medical room. Maybe in Mrs. Fu's room. But Mrs. Fu is now on guard. We can't just rush in and look for it. At this time, I thought of a person, the former nanny of the Fu family. Yesterday in the old house, I saw a middle-aged woman standing at the entrance of the stairs. When she looked at the stars, her eyes were different from others. She is not indifferent. She is guilty. I asked Shin Yan, who was the person in charge of taking care of the stars in the Fu family before. Shin Yan immediately asked someone to check. Soon, the name came out. Aunt Zhou. She worked in the Fu family for 8 years and suddenly resigned 3 months ago. The reason for the resignation was the illness of the mother. I said, find her. Shin Yan's people moved quickly. 40 minutes later, we found Aunt Zhou. She lives in an old community in the south of the city. I didn't bring a lot of people. Only Shin Yan and a lawyer were brought with him. When Aunt Zhou opened the door and saw us, her face immediately turned white. She wanted to close the door. I reached out to block it. Aunt Zhou, I'm not here to harm you. Her voice trembled. I don't know anything. I looked at her. The stars are in the hospital. She had a high fever, convulsions, and doctors said there might be nerve damage. The vegetable basket in Aunt Zhou's hand fell to the ground. Her lips trembled. How could this happen? I didn't let her react. She knew. She must know. I took out my phone and showed her a photo of Xingxing lying on the hospital bed. She's only 4.5 years old. Aunt Zhou's eyes were red. I said, each of you says you are just obedient. Ji Ruowei said she was just taking care of her. The doctor said he was just prescribing medicine. And Butler Lu said he was just doing errands. What about you? Do you also want to say that you were just a nanny? Aunt Zhou cried. I really didn't hurt her. Then save her. I put the photo in front of her. When she hurts, no one hurts for her. When she was scared, no one took her away. Now she may not be able to wake up. Do you still want to continue pretending not to know? Aunt Zhou covered her face and squatted on the ground crying. Shin Yan stood aside and said nothing. After a long time, Aunt Zhou finally said, there is a safe in the old lattice room. There are drug records and injections prescribed by Dr. Han every time he comes. My heart tightened. Where's the password? I don't know. Shin Yan immediately said, the safe can be opened. Aunt Zhou shook her head. Not an ordinary safe. There is also a spare place. In the underground wine cellar of the old house. Dr. Han sometimes puts things there. Do you have any evidence? The lawyer asked. Aunt Zhou wiped her tears and took out an old mobile phone from the depths of the closet. I recorded it once. She turned on the video. The picture is very dark. It should have been secretly filmed in the corridor of the Fu family's old house. In the video, Mrs. Fu is sitting in a wheelchair and Dr. Han is standing in front of her. Old Mrs. Fu said, the dose cannot be stopped. She is too lively to control. Dr. Han said, if this continues, the child's nervous system will be affected. Old Mrs. Fu said coldly, what I want is for her to be obedient. Not for her health. My fingers were cold. The video continues. Dr. Han asked, what if Mr. Shin finds out? Old Mrs. Fu said, he can't find it. Ji Ruowei will block it for us. That child is the rope that holds him. The video ends here. Aunt Zhou cried and said, I thought about calling the police, but I was afraid. The old lady said, if I dare to say it, I will let my son lose his job and let my mother be confiscated from the hospital. I looked at her. I hate her silence. But I don't have time to hate now. Come back to the old house with us. She nodded. Within an hour, the police rushed to the Fu family's old house with search procedures. Old Mrs. Fu sat in the hall, holding a small medicine bottle in her hand. She saw us and smiled. Shin Yan, I thought you would be a little faster. Shin Yan didn't look at the medicine bottle in her hand. He only asked, where is Dr. Han? Old Mrs. Fu's eyes changed. What do you ask him to do? I looked at her. Because what you have in your hand may not be able to save the stars. Her face sank. Xiao Xiao, are you really not afraid of her death? I took a step closer. I'm afraid. My voice is very steady, so I wouldn't trust anyone who hurt her. The police began searching. The calmness on Mrs. Fu's face cracked little by little. She finally realized that we were not here to exchange. We are here to get evidence. She said sharply, this is the Fu family. Who allowed you to roam? The police presented the documents. Please cooperate with the investigation. Old Mrs. Fu was trembling with anger. Shinan, are you really going to force the Fu family to this point? Shin Yan looked at her. It was you who forced the Fu family to this point. Soon, the underground cellar was opened. In a hidden freezer, the police found multiple unopened injections and complete medication records. Dr. Han did not go abroad. He hid in a nursing home under the name of the Fu family. Shin Yanren and the police rushed over at the same time and took him back to the hospital. After the doctor got the drug ingredients, he immediately adjusted the treatment plan. The stars are saved. When I heard the news, my legs went weak and I almost knelt down. Shin Yan supported me. This time, I didn't push away. I'm so tired. It's really tiring. In the hospital, the doctor gave Xingxing an emergency treatment. The high fever slowly subsides. Her convulsions also stopped. When it was almost dawn, She finally opened her eyes. She looked at me in a low voice. Mom. I held her hand and tears fell on the back of her hand. Mom is here. She looked at the boat next to her again. Little dinosaur. Xiaozhou immediately took out the toy. Here. I didn't lose it. The corners of Xingxing's mouth moved slightly. She wanted to laugh, but the body is too weak, so I can only close my eyes. Doctor said she was temporarily out of danger, but she would need long-term treatment and psychological intervention. I nodded. As long as she is alive. As long as she still has a chance to get better, I can wait. Mrs. Fu was officially taken away for investigation. This time, she could no longer hide with physical discomfort. Aunt Zhou's candid video, drug records, Dr. Han's confession, Butler Lu's testimony, and Ji Ruowei's participation records are all connected into a complete line. Ji Ruowei also completely collapsed. She admitted during the interrogation that she took away the stars in order to marry Shen Yan. She said that Mrs. Fu promised that as long as she kept the stars by her side and made Eve Ryan think that the children could not live without her, she could become Shen Yan's wife. She also said that Butler Lu was responsible for bribing the hospital, falsifying death records and waiving support agreements. As for Shen Man, she admitted that she arranged a car accident 5 years ago to prevent Shen Yan from going to me. The news of Shen Man's surrender came 3 days later. She didn't see Shen Yan. Only one sentence remained. I don't regret letting you go back to the Fu family, but I regret underestimating that you love her. After hearing this, Shen Yan was just silent. I knew that would not comfort him, because that's not an apology. That is still control. A week later, the Fu family case officially entered the judicial process. Old Mrs. Fu, Ji Ruowei, Butler Lu, and Dr. Han were all prosecuted. Shen Man was also investigated for charges related to the car accident and falsification of evidence. The old school of the Fu family completely collapsed under the pressure of public opinion and law. Shen Yan did not return to Fu's family again. He separated his calm, Painy and reformed the team. Many people in the capital said he was crazy, said that he gave up half of the Fu family for a woman and 2 children. When I heard these words, I just thought it was ridiculous. They still don't understand. Shen Yan didn't give up the Fu family for me. He finally didn't want the cannibalistic cage. The star stayed in the hospital for 20 days. On the day she was discharged from the hospital, the weather was fine. Xiaozhou was wearing a blue coat and stood at the door waiting for her. He held a new baby dinosaur in his hand. The stars were let out by me. She was much better energetic than when she first woke up, but she was still very thin. The boat handed her the little dinosaur. Discharge gifts. Xingxing took it and whispered, "Thank you, brother." Xiaozhou straightened his chest. "Am my brother?" "I should." Shen Yan stood next to them and looked at them. I saw a smile and sour in his eyes. He missed these pictures for too long. Upon returning to the dacha, the star began to slowly adapt to his new life. She learned to speak loudly. Although the voice is still not loud, she learned to say "I want" when she wanted to drink milk. She learned not to cry when she broke her toys. She learned to ask me to tell 2 stories before bed instead of 1. Xiaozhou A. LSO began to become more like his brother. He will hold the stars at the entrance of the kindergarten. When someone asks them if they are twins, he will proudly say, "Yes, she is my sister." Stars are shy at first. Later, he would also add in a low voice, "He is my brother." I got back to work. I didn't go back to my original city, not because of fear. It is because the 2 children need stable treatment in life. I opened a children's psychological escort studio in the capital. The place is not big and the decoration is very simple. I want to help Chil, Dren who, like the stars, have been hurt by adults but don't know how to speak. On the opening day, Shen Yan sent a bouquet of flowers. Not roses. It was a bouquet of sunflowers. There is only 1 sentence on the card. "I wish you a good idea. Always to the light." I looked at the line and smiled. Xiaozhou asked, "Mom, did Dad write well?" I said, "It's okay." Xingxing looked at it carefully. Dad's handwriting is not as good looking as Mom. Xiaozhou nodded immediately. "I think so too." Shen Yan stood at the door, heard this, and smiled helplessly. He now picks up and drops off his children every day. At first, Xiaozhou was very excited. Later, he got used to it and began to be picky. "Dad, you're 2 minutes late today." Shen Yan looked down at his watch. "I'm sorry. Be on time tomorrow." "Okay." The stars also began to make demands on him. "Dad, I don't want to take a black car." "Why?" "Like the Fu family's car." Shen Yan changed to a white car the next day. Xiaozhou asked, "Dad, are you rich?" Shen Yan glanced at me. "It's okay." Xiaozhou breathed a sigh of relief. "Then you can buy a lot of milk." The star whispered, "There are also baby dinosaurs." Shen Yan nodded. "You can buy it." I stood next to them, looking at them, and felt a very slow sourness in my heart. I didn't forgive Shen Yan immediately. He didn't urge either. He just does things. He learned to make breakfast for his children. The first time I fried an egg, it was mushy. Xiaozhou looked at the blackened egg and was silent for a long time. Finally he said, "Dad, will you really make money?" Shen Yan was stunned. "Yes," Xiaozhou said seriously. "Then you should make money. Cook and let your mother come." I laughed so hard that I almost couldn't stand still. Shen Yenya laughed. The second time, he learned to cook noodles. Although the noodles were cooked too soft, the stars finished half a bowl. She said, What my father made is not bad. Shin Yen seemed to have won some award. That night, he was washing dishes in the kitchen. I leaned against the door and looked at him. Shin Yen. He turned around. "Ha," I said. "Don't you feel tired?" His hands were still wet. He turned off the tap, dried his hands, and walked up to me. "No, every day in the company, in the hospital, in the children, in the kitchen. You weren't the one who lived like this before. I missed 5 years. He looked at me and said, "Now every day." I asked for it. My heart trembled slightly. He didn't come near me. No more was said. During this time, he has been very restrained. He would take care of the kids, handle legal paperwork for me, and bring hot milk when I was busy late. But he never crosses the line. He does not mention compounding. No mention of marriage. Don't mention the sweetness of the past. He seems to really understand that making up is not pulling people back to their original positions. Instead, stand still and wait for the other party to be willing to approach. On the day of the case, I testified in court. Ji Ruowei sat in the dock. She has lost a lot of weight, and her face no longer has the arrogance she had at the beginning. She saw me with a complicated look in her eyes, resentment, unwillingness, and a little despair. When it was her turn to make a statement, she suddenly cried. She said, "I just love Shin Yen too much." I sat on the witness stand, heard this, and looked at her calmly. The judge asked me if I had anything to add. I stood up. I said, "Love is not stealing someone else's child. Love is not about letting a 4.5-year-old girl take medicine for a long time. Love is not about ruining another woman's life with lies." I looked at Ji Ruowei. "You don't love Shin Yen. You only love the victories you imagine." Ji Ruowei lowered her head. She finally stopped talking. When Mrs. Fu appeared in court, she still tried to maintain her dignity. She said that she was old and couldn't remember many things. She said that everything was misunderstood by her subordinates. She said that she was just for the stability of the Fu family. As I listened to these words, I suddenly remembered that she was sitting in a high position 5 years ago and said to me, "In the capital, what the Fu family wants will belong to the Fu family." Now, she sits in the dock. She is no longer the one who judges me. The law is the one who judges her. In the end, the court did not pronounce the verdict in court, but the chain of evidence is already very clear. When I walked out of the courthouse, it was bright. Shin Yen stood at the bottom of the steps and waited for me. The 2 children did not come. I don't want them to face that. Shin Yen looked at me. "Thank you for your hard work." I shook my head. "It's okay." He handed me a bottle of water. I took it. We walked side by side to the parking lot. Halfway through, I stopped. "Shin Yen." He turned around. I looked at him. "I still think about the past." His eyes darkened. "I know. I will think of me giving birth alone, of me escaping with a boat, of every day I thought the stars were dead." His fingers slowly tightened. I continued. "These things don't suddenly hurt because the truth comes out. I know, so I can't just throw myself into your arms and say we're going to start over when I hear you say I'm sorry like in the novel." Shin Yan's voice was very low. I didn't expect that. I looked at him, but he raised his eyes. I said, "I can't deny it. I still love you." Shin Yen froze. It was the first time I saw him lose control like this. It was as if he had forgotten to breathe. I laughed. "Don't be too happy." His eyes were red. "Okay, I can get to know you again. Or I can give you a chance to chase me." I said, "But Shin Yen, I won't cling to you anymore. I don't want the position of a wealthy wife, and I don't want anyone to protect me for the rest of my life." I looked into his eyes. "What I want is to stand side by side." Shin Yen nodded. "Okay." He spoke lightly, but solemnly. "This time, it's up to you to decide the progress." I suddenly felt a little hot in my eyes, not because of grievances. It's because I can finally stand in the sun and say what I want. It was not driven away by the Fu family. It was not recovered by Shin Yen. It's not who arranges the ending. I chose it myself. A year later, the case was officially pronounced. Ji Ruowei, Butler Liu, and Dr. Han all received the punishment they deserved. Old Mrs. Fu was sentenced on a number of charges, and the reputation of the Fu family completely collapsed. Shin Man also paid the price for the car accident that year. On the day the news came out, I was painting with a little girl in the studio. The phone lit up. I finished reading the news and buckled the screen on the table. There is no imaginary ecstasy in my heart. There is only a deep silence. Not all injuries have a perfect ending, but at least the one who hurts us is no longer on top. At least, my children don't have to be afraid of them coming back. When I went home in the evening, Shin Yan had already prepared a meal. This time there is no paste. Xiao Zhou took a bite and nodded solemnly. "Dad has made great progress." The star also said, "Better than last time." Shin Yan looked at me. "What about you?" I took a bite. "It's okay." Xiao Zhou immediately said. "Mom said it's okay. It's delicious." Shin Yan smiled. After the meal, the 2 children played in the garden. The star is not running fast now, but she has dared to run. Xiao Zhou shouted in front. "Sister, hurry up." The star hugged the little dinosaur and chased him with a smile. Her laughter was not loud, but it was clear. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked at them. Shin Yan walked up to me. He held a small box in his hand. I have seen it for a long time. He knew I saw it. He was a little nervous. "This is rare." "Xiao Xiao. May I ask you a question?" Ask. He opened the box. Inside is a ring, not a very exaggerated style. It's simple, like he has finally learned what restraint is. He was in no hurry to get on his knees. Just look at me. Can I chase you again for the rest of my life? I didn't answer right away. I took a document from my bag and handed it to him. Shen Yan's eyes changed slightly. What is this? Household registration application and child information change materials. He took it and turned it over. Both the boat and the stars keep my last name. At the same time, it supplements Shen Yan's information as a father. I said, they are my children and your children. Shen Yan looked up at me. I continued. But they are themselves first and foremost. His eyes slowly turned red. I understand. We will discuss every decision they make in the future. It's not you who decide. And it's not me alone. Okay. Also, I won't marry you right away. He nodded. Okay. You have to keep chasing. Okay. If you don't chase well, I will refuse. Shen Yan smiled. His eyes still red. Okay. I looked at the ring in his hand. After a long time, I stretched out my hand. Try it on first. He was stunned. Try. Yes. I said. Probationary period. Shen Yan lowered his head and smiled. He put the ring on my hand. His hand was steady, but it trembled slightly when it touched my fingertips. I didn't debunk him. In the garden, Xiaozhou suddenly shouted, Mom, Dad, my sister outperformed me. Xing Xing smiled and said, Brother. Slow. Xiaozhou was not convinced. I'll let you. The stars hugged the little dinosaur and ran in front of me. She saw the ring on my hand and her eyes lit up. Mom, this is a beautiful circle. The boat also ran over. He looked at Shen Yan. Dad, did you succeed in proposing? Shen Yan looked at me. I said, still trying. Xiaozhou nodded seriously. Dad, you have to work hard. Shen Yan squatted down. Okay, I'll do my best. The stars suddenly hugged my legs. Mom, will we always be together? I looked down at her. There was still a little uneasiness in her eyes. Those wounds don't go away overnight. But that's okay. We have a lot of time. I touched her head. Yes. The boat immediately hugged the other side of me. I want to be together forever. Shen Yan stood next to us and looked at us. I reached out to him. He was stunned for a moment, then held it. This is the first time I have taken the initiative to lead him. His hands were warm. Many years later, Xiaozhou and Xingxing flipped through old newspapers at home. The newspaper was stored in a box in my study. In the newspaper, Shen Yan was wearing a black suit, with cold eyebrows and eyes, and looked like a mountain that could not be approached. The star pointed to the photo and asked me, Mom, were you afraid when you saw this photo? I said, I'm afraid. Xiaozhou asked, what about now? I looked at the kitchen. Shen Yan was cooking in an apron. He looked down at the pot, his expression more serious than opening the boardroom. The next second, a little smoke came out of the pot. Xiaozhou shouted, Dad, it's muddy. Shen Yan immediately turned off the fire. Stars smiled and bent their eyes. I laughed too. I looked at the old newspaper and then at the man in the kitchen. I'm not afraid now, because this time, I didn't run away again. My children were not taken away again. And Shen Xian finally learned to come back. He is no longer the crown prince of the Fu family. I am no longer the woman who is driven to a dead end. We all came out of that darkness, with wounds, but also with light. The story does not go back in time. It went to new places. There are no lies, no cages. No one decides my fate for me. There is the laughter of small boats, the little dinosaurs of the stars, and the studio that I opened with my own hands. There was also Shen Yan standing beside me. Not high, it is standing side by side.